Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Leonardo Vivas. He's a professor at Lesley University, and today we're going to decode what's happening between the US and Venezuela. Leonardo, there's been a third strike on a Venezuelan boat. Tensions seem to be spiking. Very quickly, for our global audience, can you give us an overview of US Venezuela relations?
Well, Venezuela's relations with the U.S. had been very tense for a number of years. That started at the beginning of the century when Chavez came to power, and uh, and after that it's been deteriorating progressively, and more so after Chavez passed and Maduro was elected and became a president. And but the reason here now has changed because during the first Trump administration, there was what it was called maximum pressure strategy on the U.S. to produce and enforce and political change, regime change. But now the strategy has changed because this idea of regime shame is not very popular in the Republican Party or in the MAGA base. So they have changed, switched in their strategy and their narrative, and now it's a matter of national security, and the reason is because Venezuela uh, is you know is part of what they consider a terrorist groups because they are narco traffickers and well, the difference is that there is one cartel, the cartel of the Suns, that has been declared a terrorist group, and different to other cartels. This is not a private one. This is a cartel that works within the government, including members of the government and particularly members of the military, and that's a reason why the strategy has changed, and now it's a matter of of uh, of a security issue, and that's why they've mobilized this fleet and all these resources to the Caribbean.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. It's more than just a fleet. There are stealth fighter jets in Puerto Rico, and of course, the Pentagon has made statements that any aggression from Venezuela or from Maduro's forces would be met with even more aggression. Do you think we've
Yes.
reached a point where we are beyond optics and are probably inching towards a conflict?
Well, it's hard to tell. We don't know. We don't know. It's difficult to tell. I don't think because if it were only to put some pressure, they wouldn't use you know such a number, five ships, a nuclear submarine, and this fleet of planes in Puerto Rico of last generation. So it's it doesn't seem to be only to use to stop small boats in the near Venezuela's shores. I don't. So, oh, the nature of the and you know the different actions that the U.S. has taken in the last years. Uh, they involve a number of possible options, from extraction to bombing certain facilities, or anything but an invasion. I mean, the invasion is totally out of the picture. That's not, and the reason is because Venezuela is too big a country. just if you compare what happened in the last invasion in Latin America, that was Panama in 1989, they needed 25,000 soldiers, which included 10,000 that were already in Panama, plus an additional, additional army that came, and the reason at the time was similar because the president at the time was involved in drug trafficking, and it was a dictator too, and so that's a similarity. But in this case, it doesn't apply. There's not going to be any invasion of. So there could be some other, and but they are doing this in a way to put a lot of pressure on the regime, which is at I would believe at its weakest in a long time.
Leonardo, I was speaking to Kyle Moran, a Young Voices contributor on US-Venezuela tensions, and he also said that a full-out invasion seemed unlikely, but punitive strikes on drug cartels and cartel-linked assets would increase. Now, my question to you is, do you think this is actually about drug cartels, or do you think it's more about energy and oil? Because let's not forget, Venezuela is known for having large oil reserves, I think the largest in the world. Do you think the Trump administration is using cartels as an excuse to maybe, gain some more control over oil reserves in the region?
Well, I don't think so because the oil industry in Venezuela is in pretty bad shape. Most of what is produced in oil in Venezuela is owned by the national company PDVSA, and in the last 20 years, PDVSA has become very weak. Its production diminished from 3.3, 3.1 million barrels a day to a max production in current days that at its best it gets to 1.7, 1.6 million barrels a day. And some of these are produced by joint ventures because Venezuela has no capacity. Venezuela has not been exploring. You have several phases. You explore, then you do the exploitation, the production, and then you do the distribution. And most of Venezuelan oil is heavy oil, so you have to have very particular technological ways to move that oil, which is very heavy in the ducts. So and then the same use special ships to carry the oil. So and this requires a lot of money. So uh, I don't think that would be the reason because it, currently Venezuela's role in the oil market internationally has diminished. It really doesn't count. Venezuela in or out doesn't make a huge difference. And and as I said, if you're going to exploit more oil in Venezuela, you have to do it with the heavy oil, and not every refinery in the world is ready to refine Venezuelan oil, which is requires very specific characteristics because it's a very heavy oil. So I don't think that is the main issue. I would have thought that behind this narrative of security, which may have a point, but not. I wouldn't say that's the main reason. It's a way for them to sell it internally, but I do think that uh, they want to, or either they want to have an agreement on with Venezuela with other aspects because they're deporting thousands of Venezuelans, as many as they can out of the U.S. and either that or to force Maduro out of power. So those two possibilities are on the table.
Let's talk about Maduro then. He's clung to power for years. He's faced sanctions. Some may say he survived them, but he has been isolated. He has very few friends in the neighborhood and abroad and in the broader region. Who is really supporting him? And do you think that he's going to be able to survive this crisis?
Well, we don't know because he is a, a natural survivor. He's there's one thing about Maduro is that it is the Venezuelan government is a very it's a coalition of forces. You have part comes from the army. The army was totally uh, changed the nature of the army to uh, to make it very difficult to have, for instance, to have a coup. And it was with the support of Cuba, which helped redesign the way it works. Uh, and even you have, the Cubans still doing surveillance of military officers all the time. They're still in that kind of business in Venezuela. But then you have other factors, and these factors which used to be more political within the civilians or within the military have become less and less political, and they have become more about money. And because oil is not doesn't have the importance they used to have in Venezuela. Now it is the drug trafficking that has become and other kind of illegal activities that count. So like 2 days ago, like no, like 4 days ago, there was an interview uh, uh, of a landowner in the who used to have a property in the border with Colombia, and what he was saying, he was a political prisoner for 5 years, and the reason why he was captured and put in prison is because Diosdado Cabello, who is currently the minister of the Interior, came to him and said, "Okay, let me buy your property for these amount of dollars," and because he said no, he was put in prison. And the reason is because this property is right on the border, and with the Rio Arauca, which is goes in the border between the two countries, and there is a lake, and there are three small airports, so it was perfect for doing that. So there's part of Venezuela that are completely controlled by some of these groups, either directly cartels or armed groups like the ELN from Colombia. So you have the participation of these groups, and maybe they're not taking the political decisions in the government because why would they care? But they are part of maintaining the status quo because that is the way. That's how they thrive, and that the amount of cocaine and other drugs that have been uh, going to the market from Venezuela has grown increasingly, and where some experts talk about 30% is going to other parts of Central America, and from there to the U.S. So in that regard, there is a point in terms of security from the U.S., but as I said, I don't think it's the only thing that is. So, uh, well, Maduro, the question of Maduro is that he is the one that brings all these factors together. He is kind of the cement so far. So maybe the strategy of getting rid of Maduro, because I do think that this is something directly, against Maduro, because he is the head of this alliance, of this coalition that rules the country, and once if he goes out, I maybe the system will start to crack. But so far, it's been him who grants this, and he has the support of Cuba, which is important in two senses. One, because it provides all this knowledge about security, and the other is because it uh, gives the regime the idea of being a revolution, which it doesn't have on its own right.
So, are you saying that in case Maduro is removed or he is no longer in power, there could be a split in Venezuela because the cartels, of course, control a
Yeah,
lot of the territory, and then you've
yeah.
got the army. Do you think that's a real possibility?
If Maduro for some reason has to leave the country, or just step down, that would, in my opinion, would be the beginning of the end. We don't know where it would end because uh, it's difficult under those strict circumstances of Maduro going out. It's difficult to go to a transition to democracy because the regime controls everything. They control justice. They control the media. They control the oil company. They control everything. So it's difficult to go from absolute control to a renovation of the political body. It's going to be difficult. So there might be a transition within the regime, but that new phase would be much weaker, and I'm not sure that it's going to stand, that it's going to hold together as Maduro has been doing so far.
Leonardo, you're a Venezuelan in the US, and there are hundreds of thousands of like you. How do you think the diaspora is seeing the current tensions between Washington and Caracas?
Well, as I think I've mentioned to you before, Venezuelans in the U.S. are in both are in the worst of two worlds. Uh, because on the one side they have become a target of the current administration for deportation. Venezuelans, there's three massive conditions for Venezuelans. One is what they call the temporary protection status, which has two groups. One that is about 300,000, and another that is approximately close to another 300,000. And then you have another 100,000 which have to do with asylum cases or refugees status. So all in all, we're talking close to 800,000. And the administration is willing to get rid of as many of these out of the country. It's going to take a long time. I'm not going to talk the details of that, which are in some cases pretty bad, pretty horrible. Which is it's not only against Venezuelans, against other nationalities. For instance, now it's happening against Brazilians in particular, at least in the Boston area where I live. But so you have that, and on the other hand, many of these people don't or can't go back to Venezuela because Venezuela is not a place. The reason why they left is not because they don't like the climate, because the climate in Venezuela is great. It's because there is no chance for the new generations or even for the older generations to survive in a country that has been collapsing, that has been going through terrible times of hyperinflation, collapsing all kinds of services, uh, you know, breakdowns of electricity uh, every other day. So the situation now it stabilized like two or 3 years ago, became better, but now it's back now to inflation going up and very so Venezuelans are kind of trapped in those situations. So So the reason I would say that a very high proportion of these Venezuelans, not only here in the U.S. but in the rest of the world and even in Venezuela, they they have lost a lot of expectations for a normal political change. Because as you know, there was an election last July, July of last year, the 28th of July, where the opposition had a landslide, 70% of the votes. Uh, and the regime just stole the election. So, which means that through a normal political route, a peaceful route, it's impossible to get rid of Maduro or a change in the politics of the country, because they just won't let go of power. And uh, so when this circumstance comes, and you have all these movements of the fleet and the Americans deciding to, to attack some of these boats, well, people, instantly think, okay, this where let's do it. I mean, people are putting a lot of their energies and hoping that this is going to bring change. I would say that the majority of Venezuelans in and out of the country are betting for a change, even though they don't have they have very little say in that change.
Leonardo, I'm sitting in India, and very recently we saw something of a very interesting uprising in the region in Nepal. The young people, basically Gen Z, they protested, and they were against the government. They were against corruption. They raised their voices. They were, of course, heavily. There was a heavy crackdown on them by the government, and well, the protests turned violent. Ultimately, the government was removed very violently. In fact, a lot of former prime ministers were beaten up in public. One prime minister's wife was burnt alive. The parliament was completely set on fire. And international media, of course, covered it that Gen Z is rising and they're leading a political change in South Asia, and this could actually lead to more such revolutions in the world. Do you see something like that happening in Venezuela, or do you think Venezuelans have given up? They've seen Maduro steal the election. They've seen what he's done to the opposition. Maria Machado, I believe that's her name. She was jailed briefly. Edmundo Gonzalez, who's supposed to have won the election, he was forced into exile. What do you think young Venezuelans are seeing the current situation as? Do you think they are hopeful, or do you think they've totally given up?
No, I don't think they've given up. Uh, Venezuelans. There is an important difference between Venezuela and other countries that are under autocratic or under dictatorships. It is because Venezuela lived during the 20th century. The last 40 years of Venezuela were years of democracy. So there is a political memory there. And first, it was more difficult for Chavez to get rid of, to implant a dictatorship, because all the institutions had been for 40 years, almost half a century, had been working under democratic, you know, law and order, the parliament, the executive, elections, local elections. I mean, there was a huge infrastructure, political infrastructure. So it was pretty difficult. It was not easy to demolish that. Or, freedom of expression, freedom of the media. Of course, they got rid of that, but it took time. But still, there is a collective memory of democracy in Venezuela, and that is what Venezuelans still want. So I don't think people have given up. I don't think they are very hopeful, because the last thing that happened was that they stole the elections. So in people's minds, but they say, okay, we tried, we won, and yet we were not able to produce change. So maybe what people are thinking is that it's not enough to win an election. There must be something else. And that is why I think people have put their hopes on something that might happen, not exclusively through elections. I think that is a bit the situation that people are living currently within and without Venezuela.
Thank you, Leonardo, for this insightful and fascinating conversation and giving insights on how Venezuela is and how fragmented the structure is, even though there is a strong man in the government, that is Nicolas Maduro, but yet he may have control right now, but things could slip out of his hand any moment, as you've explained how cartels control large parts of the country, or different parts of the country. And this is something that is going to develop further, I believe, and the pressure from United States, I think, is only going to increase on Caracas. So,
Yeah, and then you have a, a problem that, as I think you mentioned at the beginning, Maduro used to count on at least, if not the benevolence, at least the neutrality of a number of countries in Latin America, which is important.
right,
Despite the fact that there is no direct intervention, the pressure of peers in Latin America counts. And now he has no allies, no allies. He has only other countries like Nicaragua, which is another dictatorship, Cuba, and that's it. Even close allies like used to be Brazil and Colombia are, he is how to put it, he is nobody wants to take a picture, a selfie with Maduro
right.
in current times.
Not to mention, he has really ruffled feathers with neighboring Guyana over claims of wanting to annex Essequibo, which he has toned down, no doubt, but it's not sat well with Georgetown.
No, and then nobody supports him. I mean, when he did say, and he threatened to do something in Guyana, Brazil mobilized its army to the border, and Cuba has been a supporter of Guyana forever. So he is. I think it's a very difficult, not only internally but also internationally. And maybe that is why all this pressure is being put on him and the rest of the regime to to provide some semblance of change or just to crack it down.
Right. We'll
Thank
keep
you very
tracking what
much.
we'll keep tracking what happens, Leonardo. Thank you for joining
Yeah.
us.
Okay. Thank you, Rohan.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.